So it seems like it ought to be time for somebody to tell people the real secret about how to become an influencer in regards to our civil government. And guess what? It's more than blabbing on the internet.
Welcome to 1850 Main Street. Come on in and pull up a chair. Today, Rob Walgate and Alan C. Duncan from the Public Square are joined by David Zanotti, the CEO of the American Policy Roundtable.
So, Rob, Alan, you guys are dragging me kicking and screaming into the new era. All right, this whole 1850 thing is actually, it's like it's working, okay? I have to concede it's working. You've built a beautiful site. You have lots of people now starting to pay attention to what's being said and respond and communicate. And all right, I got to admit, okay, you got it. You got it on the old guy. Fred Flintstone's being dragged, like it or not, into the next era of the digital age. Okay, but the thing I still don't get is this whole nonsensical thought that people are able to influence others by just talking.
Well, I'll say Alan's done a lot of the dragging, right? I've been along for the ride, but he's been screaming for video and podcast all along. But when it comes to influencing, I think many people have began to educate others. And when you educate people, you start to have an influence, because then it allows people to do some of the homework for themselves, do some of the research, open their minds to new thoughts, new ideas, new possibilities. And I think that's what we've seen over the past handful of years.
Yeah, I think the more that people do begin to pay attention to what somebody says, the greater the burden becomes to say something worth listening to. So I don't think it's, there is a lot of blabbing on the internet, and, we support free speech. So great, blab away. But to be actually worth being listened to, I think you do need to bring something to the table. And so that's the burden that's on my heart right now is how do we speak to people in a way that's helpful, whether it's politically helpful, spiritually helpful, in many different ways. That's why we talk about a lot of the issues that we talk about in 1850. And everyone's talking about me dragging them along, but I'm really just trying to utilize the studio that you built, Dave. I mean, you built this place, but then we weren't using it to its fullest capacity. So that was my whole thing.
And that's the thing that Alan's liked. I mean, last week we had a new set. We kind of were in the editing suite in his office. I know he's got some thoughts of going to the library here on the campus and some other ideas. So it'll be bouncing around.
Well, every place that you point the camera, it could be a cool backdrop. It's a beautiful facility that we're blessed to work with and to work in. So I just want to use it. These are tools that you help to provide for us. So we're just playing in the sandbox.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, but we all know this. The American Mission Center was built with the support of about 600 people from around the country who recognized that we needed a space to do the kind of media that would help reach this culture. And so when we built it in the faith, believing that if we put no wires in the walls, the day was coming when you wouldn't need wires in the walls, so to speak. Now, we do have, obviously we have some wires in the walls, but we built this on the anticipation that eventually everything would be wireless. So we didn't run egg cartons on the floor and tons of wire. We built it in the hope of what was coming, and we had the privilege to design it, but it was the charitable contributions of 600 people directly in this project and thousands behind them, particularly listeners to the radio broadcast of the Public Square in all the different ways and that we utilize that in the different formats in Christmas in America, that said, after 45 years, we really do believe what you all are doing and we want to be a part of it. And so we're very, very grateful. And we're just getting started. We got 2 more buildings to go, so we'll see what happens next.
Well, and to go down a road I know we're not supposed to go on, and this will be a bit of a distraction. On my phone the other day, popped up the picture of the day we broke ground here at the American Mission Center over 5 years ago today, and looking back, and it had all of our kids and grandkids and staff and board, and you can't look at that picture.
Total miracle.
It's a special picture.
Yeah.
How tall was RJ in that picture? That's the question.
I think it was only 6 foot at that point.
Wow.
Yeah. So that part is really a miraculous testimony of a lot of praying people who believe that we've got to do the right thing for the sake of our country. Now, let's talk about how we do that. And by the way, we appreciate it. We do not do a lot of fundraising solicitation. We don't do banquets. We don't have a fund development staff. This is a charitable nonprofit work. Everything that we do from the Public Square Media Network, including 1850 Main Street, this is all given away. It's given away because there are people who believe enough in the heart and soul of American people that they say if we just could help them know better how the system works and why it works, they'd be more willing to participate and make an impact for good in our culture. Yes, that's what we're doing, and we've been doing it for 45 years. Most of the times we're not in the headlines. People don't see us coming because we're not trying to get famous. It's not the way it works. So how does it work? We created a grid of involvement. Now, soon we'll be sharp enough in regards to the world of graphics and stuff that as soon as I say this, up will pop a graph. It'll be amazing. All right. But the grid of involvement starts with this. How many adults are there, people that are 18 years of age and older who can vote in the United States of America? It's kind of interesting. If you take the total population, you multiply it by 80%, you come out with roughly that adult voting potential population. So it's not that complicated. Somewhere in the 280 million range is where it is as far as the people who are eligible by age to vote. Well, how many vote? Rob, in this last election, what was it, 157 million
we're
voted?
looking at, when it's all said and done and all presidential votes are counted, we'll probably be in the 155 million range.
Okay, so a little better than half the people that could vote will vote. There you go. So for all the blah, blah, blah on the internet, half the people who could vote do go vote. Interesting. Now, there's a theme that you're going to pick up here pretty quickly, and I always remember some of the best books that I ever read on sales and marketing and other stuff was always the idea that there's all the room is at the top. The books on leadership will always say there's room at the top. All the room's at the top. Well, why is that? Because most people don't want to pay the price for what it takes to get to the top. And sometimes the internet fakes us out. If I just talk about it, then maybe somehow I can make that real. It doesn't work that way. So half the people who could make an influence do by voting. But voting is by far, it's the threshold, but it's nowhere near how the country ultimately comes to be what it is. It's one step, it's the threshold. Now, of that half of the people who could participate, let's just talk about them because the other part, they all matter. They certainly matter to God, they matter to us, but they don't matter much to the politicians. Because if you're not in the process, they're not interested in listening. And don't kid yourself. If you start talking to a politician and begin to have a serious conversation, eventually they'll do a pretty quick check on your voter registration. And if you're not there, you want to know why you get a form letter back? So it's like, you're not in the game, player. Okay. It's not there. It's not there. So let's say you're one of the people that is in the game. All right. So half of the people are. Of that half, I got to tell you, 74% of those people only vote. That's all they do. They don't pay close attention. They wake up every 2 years, every 4 years. They spend maybe 30 minutes and go vote. And that's it. That's their participation. Thank God. It's really important. The consent of the governed is important, but that's it. About 24%, actually that's about 75% of the people, about 24% of the people actually pay attention. That means they watch for news stories. They pay attention online for news. They watch cable or network news. They subscribe to magazines or online subscription services of some publication. They pay attention. They have dialogue. They read publications like the Wall Street Journal or USA Today, and they talk about this stuff in their general life. About 24% of the people pay attention. That's 24% of the half that participate. And that leaves us with 1%. You know what that 1% does? They run this country. They run this country. How much room is there at the top? All the rooms at the top. There's room for people to serve in public office because most people don't want anything to do with it. They just want to complain about it. So for starters, there is room at the top. And if you're willing to start at the bottom, you'd be surprised in 10, 15, 20 years how far you can go. Now, if you're looking for a cereal box answer, like if you can read it on the back of a cereal box that solves the problem, this isn't for you. It doesn't work that way.
How many races, how many times are people, would they just run unopposed? Now, that probably happens more than people think about. Just talk about there being room. You might run for an office, not have anybody competing against you.
I think my ballot alone last week, I think there were 3, maybe 4 different races on the ballot that were unopposed for varying positions, whether it's township trustee or a local judge or whatever it may be. There were 3 or 4 that were unopposed.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast, or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for The Lamppost. Find out what America's talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
Do you guys think that with the advent of social media, whether it be X or Facebook or things, or do you think that the grid of involvement in terms of paying attention is increased by that or decreased by that? I'd almost argue that it's increased, because you don't even have to get the paper anymore, and you're going to have headlines when you open up Twitter every morning. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
That's a great question. Well, if you look, though, that the increase that's been picked up by social media and by online services is pretty much the same amount of volume that's been lost.
Oh, so they're bleeding it and they're getting it.
Yep. So it's kind of like the human behavior. Now, in fact, you can track the whole way back to the colonial period, and you'll find these numbers to be very, very similar. Now, we didn't have as much right to vote then as we do now. But what you will find is if you study it out, there was always been a leadership core of people who are paying attention. And from that leadership core, about 1 out of 4 out of the half that are paying attention, all right, they end up being the ones who forward that 1% of people into leadership. So where do you want to fit in the line? There's plenty of room. I hope it won't be, well, look, if you're listening at 1850, you're already way past, you're registered to vote, you are voting, you're participating, thank you. You just like to know how to be more influential. All right, now that brings us into collision then with the political parties. And here's something that we need to talk about coming out of this election. If you just understand the grid of involvement, you understand how easy it is for someone to come along with great ideas in a moment of need and a heart for service and have a significant impact on our culture. Give you an example. The recent storms, the hurricanes. Look at the outsized influence of Samaritan's Purse versus all the government agencies. Think about that.
No paperwork, just get the job done.
We met recently with Franklin Graham, and one of the things that he said was, it's because we are constantly preparing for the next thing that's coming. We believe in preparation, and we raise a lot of money, he said, to get prepared. So when the moment comes, we're ready and we can move. They're better than the government at this, and the government's got boatloads more money than them.
Well, and this is not a commercial for them, but I think they're filling shoeboxes right now. This is their holiday season, their Christmas.
I'm happy to give them a plug. Straight up, happy to give them a plug. Appreciate them immensely. It's huge.
You also saw that in North Carolina with the floods when you saw, I believe they called them the West Virginia boys, the people that came down with their own equipment to allow people to have access back to their homes, where they said if the government was building the roads, bringing in the engineers, doing everything, it was going to take months. I think they had it done in a matter of days just because it needed to be done. It needed to be done.
If you go back to history in America, it was 56 people that signed the Declaration of Independence. Now, they represented the 13 colonies, but there were 56 who signed that document.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, we didn't have scientific public opinion polls back then, but we know from reading enough of this that about half the people did not want to get involved. The last thing they wanted to do was start their own country and tick off Great Britain and have more troops and more ships blowing them up. They did not want to get involved. The grid of involvement hasn't changed. Then you look at the people that were willing to sign the document, the 24% of the people that were paying attention, and they made the commitments to build an army and to go out and get their heads knocked off for 8 years, just not quit. And 1% of that group led. And that group of people helped think for everybody else. But everybody was paying attention. They just helped lead in the thought process. And that group of people were then able to construct that Constitution and come back and bring in everybody that was willing to participate in the ratification process. That's how true leadership in a republic works. It hasn't changed. So you got to decide, where do you want to be? You want to be a part of the 50% that participate every 2 to 4 years? Do you want to be a part of the people that go ahead and say, I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to write a letter down to them. I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to go to a meeting. I'm going to let my voice be heard. Or you can be quiet and still be influential, but I'm going to show up. Or do I want to be a part of the 1% that gets actually into the arena or that supports the people who are in that arena?
Yes, I think that's an important part, the support people that are in that arena, because it can be a lonely place. I mean, we're distracted at times when we talk about the White House and the race for the presidency or the race for the United States Senate. But when you have that colleague that you want to encourage to run for township trustee or county commissioner or state rep or any of those races, step in, support them, and be there with them as they go along in the process, because that can be a lonely road. Because who do they hear from most? Most people that are screaming and yelling at them and saying negative things. So we have to be there to support and build up as well.
Well, one thing you didn't hear us talk about, at least didn't hear me talk about, is, and then pick a political party and dedicate the rest of your life to promoting the party. Because after 45 years of service, what we find is the parties are the last stop of the train.
I think, you learned it over 40 years. I think someone that's just waking up today doesn't have to even take that long. They can look at this last election cycle and look at people who were Democrats, lifelong Ds, and they found themselves, they woke up one day, they didn't have the same party. Like, where'd the party go? And so they joined forces and helped Donald Trump get elected. I mean, that just happen. And so there's a shifting of the parties.
And there was
it's happening
doing
in real
a
time.
card check, Alan, and saying, okay, listen, you've been a lifetime Democrat or you've been a lifetime, you can't come in. No, the politicians and the parties are the last stop on the train.
It's about
they don't
ideas.
lead anything. They follow.
Yeah, it's about the ideas.
We talked about this last week on 1850. Some of the Democrats are saying, well, we need a Joe Rogan. Well, the Democrats had Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe Rogan was a Bernie fan. The Democrats lost Joe Rogan with COVID when they went so far to the left. Yep. The Democrats lost Joe Rogan with free speech issues on social media platforms, with the government trying to control speech and having an influence. That's how they lost Joe Rogan. Some people that are new to the game are saying, well, Joe Rogan's a staunch conservative. Have you listened to his policies? Right. He's not a staunch
please
conservative.
Don't watch his. I don't mean any disrespect to Mr. Rogan. I wish him all the success in the world, but I would not recommend you watch his stand-up comedy because it can get really
pretty crude.
Yeah.
Well, Elon Musk as well. Elon Musk is not some right-wing zealot. Like he just isn't. And so strange.
And
strange
what?
times.
His vote counts just as much as yours, Alan. So what's the difference? It's all his money. Wait a second. You don't walk up there with bags of money. You still got to do the work. You got to know who your state rep is, who your state senator is, right? I mean, this is a process that's accessible.
Yeah. Speaking of money being
what was
spent,
interesting to me is I'm reading things that came in after the election, how much money Vice President Harris spent to court some of her friends, whether it be Oprah or Christina Aguilera, and I think,
well, not even court some of her friends, that apparently she was paying them to appear on their platform.
I'm sorry. I think there were some invoices that went out.
Yeah.
Man, are you kidding me?
The podcast that she did, just building the set, I believe the name of the podcast is Call Her Daddy or Call Me, whatever. Yeah. That was 6 figures, I believe, to build the set for that podcast for the vice president to appear.
Oh, just specifically for that?
Just for the set to have her appear. So the amount of money that was spent, someone was joking online on what Trump gave Hogan to appear at the RNC, a couple bottles of Mountain Dew and like some other stuff.
That's to your point, Dave. It's like you can spend all the money that you want, and you can talk on the internet all you want, but if the ideas aren't meeting people's needs, if the ideas aren't resonating with real human beings, then it's not going to work.
So we just went through an election, and the question is, a lot of people will now go back to their wonderful lives or their difficult lives, whatever the case may be. And may God bless them all. I mean, I get it. I mean, it isn't easy here. This life has got lots of heartache, and I understand, and lots of distractions. But to change a nation, it doesn't take 51% of all the people To win an election takes 51% of half the people who could vote because they don't. But even before we get there, only 1% of the people are willing to actually participate in the realm of leading. You say, well, look, I mean, those 1% are a lot smarter than me. Let me find somewhere else. Maybe the best I can do is vote. Everybody can do more than vote. You can pray. You can pay attention. You can stay up to what's going on. You can talk to friends. You can invest. There's a million little things you can do along the way to get into that 24% of the people that are paying attention. Whatever level you're in, what changes America is commitment. That's what changes America. Long-term commitment. Even if it's only a little bit, that you stay at it. That's what makes a difference. That's why we're here. Hopefully we can be of some help. Oh, and by the way, we don't invoice people for appearances.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.